You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Josh Folan. Hey everyone, thank you very much for hitting that play button. This is another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. Before I get to today's episode, I just want to mention very quickly, we are in Potter & Family's Sweet 16 podcast tournament. It's basically like March Madness meets King of the Ring. Each week, you get to vote upon which podcast advances in the brackets. Again, there's 16 of us, and we are going head-to-head this week with another podcast. So, again, it's all based on votes. So I'll be sending out the link to everyone on our email list and on social media. I would really appreciate it if you could vote for the podcast. If we could win this entire tournament, what we get is we get an entire month of promotion from Potter & Family, which, again, benefits everybody from all the guests to myself to even you, because, again, the more exposure, the more listenership, the more we all benefit. And on this episode of the podcast, I'm going to talk to a guy about networking, about wearing many different hats, about getting your work out there, and we talk about all that and so much more. My next guest is a New York-based filmmaker. He is the founder of NYEH Entertainment, which is a really cool YouTube channel, which also I link to in the show notes, and his feature-length film, Catch-22, based on the Unwritten Story by Seanie Sugrue, is out now on iTunes, Amazon, Vimeo. I link to all that in the show notes. And just a really quick plug, on the next episode, I'm actually going to have the actress of the film, Charmaine Starr. She's episode 152. I was initially going to put these two together, but the episode would have been like 2 hours, 30 minutes. And I figure you probably don't have that much time to listen to one long episode. So I've decided just to split it into as it initially was recorded anyway. So next episode, surprise, surprise. I already just told you who the guest is. So this is episode 151, though, with guest.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
Hey, Josh, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
My pleasure, man. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you here. And, Josh, just get started. I wanted to ask, when you were growing up, and this is a question I ask everybody, when you were growing up, did you always sort of have this love affair with film and television, and is that how you found yourself in the industry now?
No, not at all, to be honest with you. I mean, it's, having worked in this stuff for over a decade now, or about a decade, I shouldn't say over, as if it's been for considerably longer, but anyhow, having done it for a while now, the past couple of years, I've gotten a little introspective at times and kind of thought about what, how did I end up here? Because, I'm from the middle of nowhere, Ohio, basically, and where I'm from, making movies as a career path is not on the radar of things they tell you can do. So it was not something that I wanted to do since I was a child or anything. And I actually did. I used to, my dad and I would watch. He was going to the video store, both to rent video games and movies, is something that I didn't realize was a significant part of my childhood until I really started to think about it. But that was a very regular occurrence when I was little. The more I recall on it, and it is something that my appreciation and fondness for film as an art form and as a form of entertainment is definitely something that is rooted there to some degree or another, but it certainly wasn't something, no. I mean, I went to high school. I wasn't even sure I was going to go to college coming out of high school. I did it as kind of did okay on the SAT, why the hell not kind of thing. Picked business as there's a list of things, you got to check one of the boxes. So I checked the business because it was pretty non-specific, and I thought there'd be at least some freedom with that. And in hindsight, that was probably a wise choice because there is. And yeah, I went to school for finance, graduated with that, and I came out here. I was working in a full-time job in finance even before I graduated. Actually, I had a position for an advisory firm in Columbus, and I had done little modeling stuff locally in college, and then jewelry ads and stuff like that through some very small agency in Central Ohio, and occasionally Chicago, Michigan stuff. And some pictures had gotten out here to New York, where I've been at for the last 11 years now. to an agency, and I had a friend who already lived here, so I came out and met with that agent and stayed with my buddy for a couple weeks and went out and shook hands and kissed babies, and it went okay. So I flew back to Ohio, and there was like a 6-month period where I was flying back and forth, working for that firm 2 to 3 weeks out of the month, and then coming out here for a week or two and doing that stuff. And I didn't really like what I was doing for that firm. It wasn't fulfilling at all. And I could also give you a long, boring story about conflicts of interest with what I was selling. And my apartment lease ran up, and I kind of was like, fuck it, you're only young once. Why not go see what happens? And so I moved out here for that shit. I was here very briefly with that as the plan, and booked something for Comedy Central that was like a half acting, half modeling job that got me an acting agent. So I took some classes, and I booked her on one of the soaps not long after that. And it kind of, that's what sent me down kind of the entertainment path. And there's like, you know, everything I've done since, you know, that I started with that, you know, modeling and acting. And then the first feature that I actually started producing was stage stuff. When I was on that soap opera, another guy on the show and I started producing little stage shows with the soap stars, because soap stars are fanatical and they sold tickets very easily. So I started producing for that purpose, and doing that for a little bit, and seeing that, you know, it was something with a business background I had an acumen for. I jumped over to film, and I in trying to produce my first film, the cheapest way to find a script was to write it myself. So I wrote it, and that became All God's Creatures, the first feature that I wrote and produced. And then I started directing on my second feature that I produced, because it was a comedy that I had written, and I was like, I don't trust anyone else with this type of dumb ass comedy that I had written, executing it the way I'd want it executed. So I directed that, and that's got me down to start directing stuff. And with Catch-22, I edited it because I had been editing stuff here and there, and I decided to edit because I was like, this shit's not rocket science. Anything I can't figure out, I'll just Google and I'll figure it out as I go, which is kind of what I've done in general with this career path. Just fucking figure it out as I go.
And I think that's sometimes the best way, Josh, is just sort of, I don't want to say fake it till you make it, but you are just basically, I was just reading an article the other day about people who are hustling in La La Land, and they asked all these people, whose career do you want to emulate right now? Because, they're working 2 or 3 jobs to support themselves, and they're also trying to write at the same time. And they said, whose career do you want to emulate right now? And the number one answer was Damien Chazelle, who, of course, did La La Land, and he did Whiplash. But, I honestly, and that is something they touched on in the article was, they're writing, they're editing their own stuff, and anything they don't know, they just Google, because it's such a huge resource, right? And
absolutely. There's a YouTube tutorial to do literally anything.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to do it, you can figure it out, man. It's not, this stuff is not astrophysics or brain, neuroscience or anything. It's not particularly complicated or high stakes professional medium by any means. Making mistakes here is okay. So if you fuck up and drop the ball, like you might piss an investor off, or something, or make a piece of shit that no one likes or everyone says you're horrible for creating. But in the grand scheme of things, relatively speaking, those are pretty low stakes, I think, for a professional or a profession, rather.
Yeah, I would agree, especially, well, it's funny because I was talking about this with a couple different people about how serious to take this. And I used to take this deathly serious about when I used to make my own stuff. And I used to get into arguments all the freaking time. And now, I mean, I still, I haven't done anything in quite a while for a number of reasons. And now I do this podcast, so I can at least, I get to meet cool people like you. But now I sort of have this different perception of everything. And it's also talking to cool people like yourself and seeing what their successes, their failures, and what they've learned through all this. And some of the things that I've pulled away are, one, you learn. They and I too have always learned a lot more through failures than successes.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Yeah. And this is not one. I don't want to get into the grand filmmaker career path debate of film school or not or what have you, but I think this applies to filmmaking just as much as it applies to any profession or whatever. I think it applies to everything in life. Basically, you can't learn how to do anything until you do it, and you're obviously. With that, in that theory inherently is the fact that if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to fuck some shit up when you first try. So I think that very much applies to filmmaking, but it applied to finance too. I mean, I went to a very Ohio State for being a state school in particular is one of the better, at least when I was there. It was a top 10 finance program in the nation, and I graduated from there with a reasonably the paperwork looked good coming out of there, and when I walked into that job, I didn't use any of that shit, and I didn't know how to do anything. And even 6 months into it, when I was leaving, I was still learning stuff. What I did know was exclusively from being on the job and doing it, and that applies every bit as much to filmmaking. Like, I don't see how. I didn't go to film school, so I can't speak to it with certainty, but I don't know how the fuck you could teach someone to do this stuff in a classroom in a theoretical form. Like, it's such a, you have to be there, see it done wrong, and see the end product of having done it wrong to have any idea or understand, in my opinion, how it got to a place that you perceive as wrong. And even that's subjective, like whether or not it is wrong or is not a clearly 100% black and white thing. So, like, even more so, how do you find what is your right and wrong, your own thing, without doing it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from. By the way, I was just in New York last April, and all the police sirens I hear, it reminds me of when I was up there.
Have you heard some? I didn't even notice them.
Yeah, I was like, is Josh's house being raided right now?
I live right in Midtown on the corner of 50th and 9th, and my bedroom is second floor of this walk-up building. And it's right on the avenue. So it's just, it would be wrong to call it background noise because that would insinuate it's still noise that I hear. It's just, it's low frequency tones that aren't even, my microphone doesn't even pick up.
No, I was up there hell, I'm from Philly, right? So, I'm in Philly right now, and,
I love Philly, man. Great city for history.
Yeah, great city for history, definitely.
Old City is very cool too. Rittenhouse Square and Old City are very cool areas.
Yeah, and so that's why a lot of the people like to, they go to the Mummer Museum and see a lot of the history of Philadelphia and everything. But when I was in New York last April, I was just. I was in Manhattan, and I was just like, I slept with the window open because it was getting a little hot in there. And I remember I just kept waking up like almost probably every half an hour to an hour because there was somebody laying on the horn outside. And I was like, Jesus Christ. I was like, I don't know why. It just like, I kept waking up, and I was like, all right, I'm going back to sleep now. That'd be a sign.
Living here for a sustained period of time, dude. And this is kind of like stock New Yorker verbiage, but like, silence is terrifying. The only time you hear silence here is when something is drastically wrong. So, like, I went to the example of this I went to this writer conference in Squaw Valley in California a few summers back now, and like it's in the middle of nowhere, and it's beautiful and incredible, and like it's basically at an old Olympic site in Northern California, and a Winter Olympic site, and in the summer, it's a ski area, and in the summer, it's just a dead zone. There's nothing happening there, which is why this writers' conference goes there, because it probably costs them nothing to put it on there. But walking around outside, it's like silent. Like, literally, like the idea of silence is like very different when it's truly silent. And like the entire week I was there, I was like, I don't know, I can't explain it. It's just like on edge because it's just. There's nothing like there, and I don't know. Anytime there's nothing, something's wrong to a New Yorker. So, the antithesis of what you're saying is unsettling to us after having been here for a while.
Yeah.
So it's almost comforting to have that shit. I'm glad to hear those things, or for those things to be going on in the background.
So everyone listening, who's not from like New York or Philadelphia, they're probably like, okay, now that explains it. Actually, Josh, as we were going back, just to take a step back, I went to business school as well. That's pretty much what I did. I was, everyone kept saying to me, Dave, you got to go to college. If you don't go to college, that you're not going to be able to make anything of yourself. And I said, okay, sure. At that point in my life, well, some people know I was actually going to a professional wrestling school, which is a whole other story, but also going to college at the same time and getting that degree in business. And when I got out, the school hired me to teach video and TV production. And before that, I was a part-time event tech. But, I understand what you mean when you say, like, you got into some of these jobs, and it's just like, we went over none of this stuff in college, man. Like, what the hell is this stuff?
Exactly. Like, it's all theory. It's all theory you're taught in school. And, and honestly, I think, this is getting heady. But I think the benefits of school, like, I think the book learning component of it is just kind of set dressing, really. And I think what especially undergraduate, you get into graduate programs, doctorate, of course, they're teaching you real world things that are helpful, and you're, you doing much more high concept learning. But at the undergraduate level, it's fucking, it's different words of the same bullshit knowledge. And I think the chief function of undergraduate schooling is just social acclimation and teaching you how to fucking interact and like be a human in society, and maybe upkeep a little bit of responsibility without having a parental figure making you do the things that are making you execute responsibility. I think it has a much bigger purpose as that than actually, learning how to work on the job in specific career fields. So. Yeah, in its defense, I guess.
yeah. Somebody once told me college is where you learn how to learn.
Exactly.
I've been to so many different colleges, not as like an actual like a TA and stuff, and I kind of wonder. Sometimes I just think that there are kids in college who I really don't think that it's going to benefit them, and I think I was one of those kids. So I'm not trying to badmouth them or anything or badmouth anybody, but. I think I was one of those kids as well, where if I didn't go to college, I think, I think I would have pretty much turned out exactly the same.
Really?
Yeah.
It definitely taught me. I was much more introverted, which is probably why I have this opinion, because this is how I used it and how it benefited me. So of course that's how my viewpoint is slanted. But coming out of high school, I was so much more introverted than I was coming out of college. And it taught me, gave me a lot of confidence, gave me, allowed me to reinvent what was, I'd spent my entire childhood kind of physically undersized, intellectually probably undersized, and emotionally undersized. And college allowed me to kind of throw all that background away and start over and actually build like a real human being. if I am that now, I don't know. That's debatable, I suppose. But closer to one than I certainly was coming out of high school.
Well, that's what we're going to find out on this podcast from this episode. So, so let's, as we talk sort of, about your career, you ended up getting a gig, with Comedy Central. So again, just to sort of, reiterate it with that, did you sort of, did you apply for that and like a casting call?
Yeah, it was like I said. I had been out here. I moved out here in August of 2005, and this was the Halloween episode of this Greg Giraldo, the late Greg Giraldo now, which is crazy to me. But he had a show on Comedy Central that was like it was called, I think, Friday Night Stand Up or some shit like that with Greg Giraldo. And basically what it was an in-studio show where it had, little 5-minute segments, sometimes interviews, sometimes skits, sometimes whatever. That was basically just a connecting thing between half-hour stand-up specials that they had, already produced, and that they were just kind of replaying on Friday nights for like 2.5 hours. So for the Halloween episode, they were doing this spoof on, and this is, in fact, I even know what it is somewhat dating me, but Eliminate, is that something? How old are you?
I'm 30.
Okay, a little younger than me. There was a show on. I don't even know what network it was on. It was like in the pioneering days of reality television called Eliminate, and it was basically a dude would go on a date with 3 chicks at the same time, and he would kind of Survivor-esque send them home over the course of the night, and whoever he was making out with at the end of the night at the hot tub was the winner, I guess.
I actually remember the show, Josh.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it probably was in syndication long after it even. So, yeah, I'm sure most people have seen it. Anyhow, they were doing a spoof. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say when you were describing it, it rung a bell in my head. I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, too. Before I remember coming to a casting call. Remember, I told you I was traveling here before I had moved full time. I was traveling here for 6 months where I was coming out and doing casting calls. And I remember they sent me on a casting for the actual show one time that I, thank God, did not get. So anyhow, Greg Giraldo was doing a spoof on that show called Hellimidate for Halloween, Hell Imitate, where a chick went on a date with a witch warlock kind of guy, a vampire, and a male model supposedly, and it was of course just the hilarity that ensues with this woman interacting with these 3 vastly different individuals, 2 of which are so, of course, against the norm of what you would go on a date with, maybe all 3, I guess, technically. But, and they were like, the vampire guy is a dude who really, he was in that actual, they cast people who, they weren't just actors who put some teeth in his mouth. Like, this was a guy who, like, lives that crazy-ass subculture lifestyle, and same thing with the witch warlock guy. So they cast an actual, I was a model, I wasn't working that much, but technically, I guess, by definition, I was. So I got that gig and did that, and it was like, a TV job that played nationally and fucking got me into one of the unions. So it got me a meeting with an agent, and that's what started me with that stuff.
Yeah, so it's good you know about that, because I've always wondered about some of those dating shows, about like how real they actually are.
Nothing on no reality television show is even close to real, dude.
Yeah, well, no, because I actually know a guy who went on one of these dating shows, but here's the thing with it. He's such a creepy dude in real life that they didn't even give him any directions, because they knew some producer probably saw him and was like, look, this guy is just going to
this guy will make a story himself. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. They just ensure whatever they have to do to generate a story in what would otherwise be mundane content. That's how all the reality shows are. I have a buddy who is fucking on the production team for the Jersey fucking Shore bullshit for a while, and like the stories he has to tell about how much effort went into behind the scenes generation of storyline is insane, and I've never watched that show, but I know the crazy ass nature of it, and the more at the detriment of the subjects, no regard for their well-being at all. Whatever they had to do to create the most outlandish thing happening in front of the camera, they would do, because that's what kept the show on the air and kept money happening, which is all reality television's about. That's all any television's about.
yeah, very, very true. I had a friend of mine who I think he either, I remember he told me a story. I don't know if he worked for them or not, but I remember he told me a story about they had to manufacture storyline for Jersey Shore, and they actually had to put beer bottles on the bar, and like all sorts of like liquor bottles, but like the thing was they weren't behind the bar, they were on the bar, so that the one character could throw them across the room or whatever. Like there has never been a bar I've ever been to where they just put liquor bottles right on the front of the bar like that. No
regard. I mean, well, that's the thing. The target demo for that show, audience wise, believability, the suspension of belief is inherently there. You're not marketing that show to people who are dissecting the reality of that world that story is happening in. You know what I mean? that are questioning things.
yeah, right. They're not actually being like, I really don't believe this conflict.
Right, yeah.
But
I don't know about their motivation here. I don't know about their motivation.
I'm not really believing that that's a beer bottle. So Judge, as you sort of did, you did this Comedy Central gig, and where was it? Shortly after this, where you decided to actually write and make your own stuff.
It was probably okay. So like I said, that was winter of 2005. I got on to All My Children in June of the next year, and I would say I was probably working there for about, I think it was because we shot All God's Creatures in 2009. So I think I started writing it. I started writing that script in 2006. And that was probably before I even started that little theater company. So I had that, I worked on that forever before we even got anywhere where with other human beings were entertaining making it. So it was probably, I'd say late 2007, maybe early 2008 that I started really. Yeah, because my producing partner on All God's Creatures that I ended up actually producing that with, I met doing the horror film Spiker, which was just like some dumb little 6 kids locked in a house being chased by a monster thing, which I did 2 of those movies actually. But the second one I did was, it came out in, I believe, 2008. So I would have met him in 2008 and late 2007, 2008. And then we actually were going into production on that in 2009. So it was about a 4-year span between the first time acting, if that's what you want to call that first job, and me deciding to, or at least getting up and running, my first written produced thing.
Yeah, but making those movies where you put kids in a house and sort of kill them, I don't know if you've ever heard of Dov S.S. Simons, but like that's something he always recommends for a first movie. He goes, literally just make one location, put a bunch of kids in a house, and just kill them.
It's I've never done it from a producing standpoint because I am too snobby for that. But if I wish the whole thing is because it takes forever. These fucking things take forever, man. And like my whole thing is like, I'm probably not going to make any money no matter what I do, as far as producing little independent movies. So if I'm going to be stuck with this thing, putting sweat equity into it for 3-4 years, which is a good timeline on one of these things, I can't make something that I don't want to watch myself. Like, it has to be something that I would be entertained. Because, literally, just physically, you're going to watch it 1,000 times. Like, even if you're the editor, God forbid, it was probably more than that on Catch-22. But even just, producing with my first one, I didn't edit, I didn't even direct it. And I still saw that movie 100-something times probably before it actually came out. So if you're going to invest, just not even invest time, the production time, just if you're going to have to watch something that many times, it better be something you kind of like, or you're really going to fucking hate it by the time you're done with it, Yeah. So it would be very hard for me to decide to ever do something exclusively for like, oh, I think this could be commercially viable and I'll make some money doing it, I was out at AFM a few years ago, the film market in Santa Monica, and I think it was like right around when I was trying to sell my second feature, What Would Bear Do? And I'd been out there with All God's Creatures already, so I had some relationships with the distributors, and some of the ones that I knew already, they were kind of like trying to be helpful, and like, we don't want to buy this little slacker buddy comedy with no one in it really, but if you want to make some family faith films, those are really hot right now in X, Y, and Z market. And I'm like, yeah, like, no, that's just got no way. Like, there's just no way I could spend 3 years looking at a family faith film. Like I am like religion is not something I'm into, just as a disclaimer. And like the idea of like completely buying into that as a story setting for 3-4 years on a project, there's just no way. I don't give a shit how much money. There's literally no amount of money that could get me to do it at least well, you know, I mean, I guess if he paid me enough, I'd like, okay, I'll sit here, but like, you know what I mean? Like, I could, there's no way I could creatively be beneficial to the project because I don't buy into any of that, you know? So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's a big part of deciding the content to create. It's got to be something that you're into, that you would want to watch, that, you know, and that's a driving factor with any project I have. It's, you know, the new one, we start shooting a new one on March 4th, and the same guy that I did Catch-22 with. And, you know, we were joking the other day. They're like, you know, I just want to watch this thing. Like, I don't want to spend the time to make this fucking movie. I mean, you know, and that's a little bit of an exaggeration. Of course I do. I'm doing it and I'll enjoy it, but it would be very, like, I just want to see the movie. Like, that's my driving factor for making this film, is like, I just want to see it. I wish I could pay someone else to do all the fucking grunt work to make it happen just so I could sit down and watch it. But we can't afford that, so I'm going to have to do it.
Yeah, and you know, that's something also with doing this podcast. You know, people, you know, different writers, directors, you know, they have to be passionate about the project, because they, you know, I mean, I've worked on projects that I really couldn't care one way or another about, and it ends up showing. I mean, you know, I got hired to direct a TV pilot a couple years ago, and I was sort of like probably 4th or 5th on our list to actually direct this thing, and I was like, you know what, I didn't even care about it anyway, so it's a good thing I didn't get it. Well, about like a month before they were going to start shooting, their director dumped them, and because he couldn't get along with the producers, so they went through their next like couple of choices, and they were like, they were busy, so they hit to me, and I'm like, well, I'm like your 5th choice. I feel so honored.
That's how so much happens in entertainment, though.
Yeah, but you know, I understand immediately exactly what you're saying, Josh. About, you know, you need to have, there needs to be this inner motivation for you to do this project, and
Absolutely.
I think and it shows when people go, you know, when it's sort of like what some people would call a passion project. You know what I mean?
Yep, definitely, without question, man.
So
yeah. It's a hard process. If you're not into it, I just can't imagine. I honestly can't imagine. I don't know how. I don't know how anybody, like it's, you know, a certain amount of money, anyone will do anything. But I've never been offered that much to do something I hate, so I don't know. I can't speak to it. It would take an awful lot.
So, you know, you mentioned Catch-22. I actually, I'm interested to hear the whole story about this project, because that's sort of how the impetus, how, you know, we started talking. So, you know, could you take me and the whole audience? Could you take us sort of the intro of Catch-22?
Just what the film's about, or how it came to be?
Actually both. Yeah,
Okay.
A little bit of both.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, you know, the gloss over pitch for it is it's an extremely dark thriller about 5 guys. They're, you know, New York raised, blue collar guys, all kind of fuck ups. Grew up together, known each other for 30 some years, and one of them is going away to prison for some drug charges, some drug trafficking charges, and his 4 buddies take him out as a last send-off hurrah. He's out on bail, and his buddies take him as a last send-off hurrah. This is a little a la 25th Hour. Not too shy or too proud to say that. It's a little bit of a 25th Hour setup there. And the story starts at sunset, or rather sunrise. They go out like in the morning prior to the morning, as turns himself back in. And they go out at sunrise, and the story actually starts at sunset of that day prior, and they're waking up in one of the guys' apartments. They don't really remember why they're passed out, how the day wound down, why that's the case, and there's a dead girl in the apartment with them, and none of them at least claim to know what's up with that. So the story begins with them trying to figure that out, piece it together, and come up with an explanation, and then also a solution. But the narrative is much more about these 5 dudes. Waking up to a dead girl in the apartment is actually one of the less fucked up things that they have done together and that has happened to them as a collective. And much of those things has either not been addressed to the full degree that it should have been, or not even been brought to light as well as it should have been. So this extremely tumultuous catalyst, or situation rather, is just a catalyst for them beginning to do that, to deal with these other things. between the five of them. And that, group dynamic working itself out just happens with the backdrop of them dealing with that girl physically. And sorry, were you gonna ask her?
Well, yeah, I was gonna say so because I actually like the sub part of the title too, Catch-22, based on an unwritten story.
Yes.
So
that's a double entendre, both within the story and in real life, which is part of how this project happened that I really like as well.
So how did the project come to be? I mean,
So the guy that I wrote it and produced it with, my buddy Seanie, I've known for like a decade, and we met bartending at some bar in Murray Hill in New York here in Manhattan, and like I said, I've known him for 10 years, and I didn't know him to be a writer for any part of that. And this was summer of 2013. We went and saw a movie together. He called me one afternoon in the middle of the summer, kind of out of nowhere, which is not, we don't go to see movies together often. It was a little bit random. And he calls me up. He's like, "Hey, man, what are you doing? Want to go see a movie?" And I happened to be free. I was like, "Sure, man, let's go." And we went and saw Fruitvale Station at Kips Bay in Manhattan, which is not far from that Bar 12, actually, that we worked at, that we bartended at. But anyhow, we were walking out of the movie theater, and I had just I wrote a book about the first feature I produced, kind of like a case study thing called Filmmaking the Hard Way. And that had just come out, and he and I were bullshitting about that, and I was talking about doing a long-form fiction thing for the first time. And in that conversation, he mentions to me that, "Hey, man, I was going to write something once." And as I said, I didn't know him to be a writer. So I said, "Okay, Seanie, what the fuck were you going to write? Pitch me." Like, what was your story? What was the thing you were going to write? And, the story that he told me is the foundation for what this film became. And, he tells me this setup, and I'm like, "Dude, that's a really good idea. You're not going to write that? You're never going to do that? I'm stealing that." And he's like, "Oh yeah, man, I never really got past the title page." "Sure, absolutely." So I'm literally, we're literally walking up to my apartment in a little further up on the east side. The whole time I'm jamming things into my Evernote as we're talking. And so we decided to write it together, basically. And I did all the finger to keyboard, actual physical writing, but we would meet, we talked extensively in the beginning, and then we would meet at each act break and kind of talk about where the story was at, where it was going, and then work together once the first draft was done, which happened around Christmas time of that year, to develop it, refine it as the rewrite process goes. And once we got it to a place that we really liked, we decided to produce it together. And all the while that's happening, I come to find out that the reason he called me that day, he was about 6 months sober at that time. And, he had lost a marriage. He was in a pretty fucked up place when he was still drinking, amongst other things. And the reason he called me that day was because he was kind of freaking out. He was thinking about going and drinking, and he wanted to call someone who wouldn't want to go to a bar, and I certainly wouldn't want him to go to a bar. So that's why he called me to go see that movie that day. And for that reason, the project tentatively was named the Untitled Story written by Seanie Sugrue, is because he never wrote it, or the Unwritten Story by Seanie Sugrue. What the hell's the title of this movie?
Based on the Unwritten Story.
Based on the Unwritten Story by Seanie Sugrue. Jesus Christ. So yeah, so he physically never wrote it, right? That's so in real life, it's an unwritten story by Seanie Sugrue. He didn't write it, So there's that, and also that that alludes to this whole movie's about friendship and whether or not these guys can put the group, the collective, their love for each other in front of themselves and their own self-preservation, and kind of fucking the rest of the group in favor of getting out of this situation themselves. You know what I mean? So it's a movie about friendship, and I think this movie happened because of friendship. He called me for help that day, and this movie got onto my radar, and we decided to work together on it exclusively as an extension of our friendship. And I think that's a really, really nice thing. And and a cool thing, and a much. This is the first project I've ever had with that kind of personal impetus to make happen, and the idea that we were able to turn what amounts to probably one of the darker parts of his life, I would assume, into what is now, it obviously a feature film that he co-wrote, co-produced, and that gave him the confidence he has now written to start writing, actually, and he's now written and produced 5 original plays in the last 2 years in New York, which is insane. It's an insane output as a playwright. And that, I think, is an extension of him working with me on this and getting the confidence to actually begin writing himself, which is a really cool thing. So there's that really cool thing. And then within the story itself, one of the lead characters is Seanie. So he's a writer. And he's the only of the 5 with any success behind him. And it's because he's written these books that have been done very well. And they're all based on, names changed, but they're all based on all the really fucked up shit that's happened to the group. So he has basically become wealthy, become famous, become successful at the expense of his 4 best friends, and himself, actually, the 5 of them collectively. And he has a great deal of guilt about that. And when this fucked up thing happens this time, the setup for this movie, waking up to the girl, there's the immediate jokes start flowing from and fucking and razzing from his buddies that this is basically another one of his books happening. And the way the story pans out, he never gets a chance to write that story either. So there is, as I said, both the real world Seanie Sugrue didn't get to write the story because I wrote it instead, and then the character within the story itself also never gets to write the story that he would have written that we watch as the audience too, which is cool, which we've had to fight pretty hard to keep that long-ass verbose title with distributors and what have you. And we have done so. I'm proud of that.
So when you actually were able, when you finally wrote this screenplay, when you went around to pitch it, did they actually bring that up, or when you went to producers, did anybody ever say to you like, hey Josh, we would love to put the money in the script, but what the hell is up with that with the subtitle?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's funny, dude. The Catch-22 part wasn't there originally. It was originally just the Unwritten Story by Seanie Sugrue. Or based on the Unwritten Story by Seanie Sugrue is what it was originally called. Sorry. And the Catch-22 came out of in writing the script. There, I happened to throw. There's a line where the guy mentions the situation. The thing they're talking about is a Catch-22, and it's a rather significant point in the narrative. And I just liked it. And so after the script was written is when we tacked that on. And maybe even, had started raising money. I'm not entirely sure, but it was definitely late in the process. It wasn't originally that full thing. I had never read the book, Joseph. I didn't even know it was a book. To me, it was just some shit that my dad said when I was a kid occasionally. That's what Catch-22 was to me. It was just a saying. I didn't even know that Joseph Heller's book existed, which is mind-blowing to some people. Perhaps it's because I'm from middle of fucking nowhere, Ohio, and it wasn't in the reading curriculum in school, so I don't know. But I had never, and so once we tacked that on to the beginning of the title, people started saying like, "Oh, Catch-22, have you read the book?" And so I was like, "Okay, no, I haven't, but you people keep asking me, so I'm going to get it." And I don't really care for it. It's a little prosy for me. It's almost like a novel-length poem. It's very stylized in the way that the writing. So it's not even a book I necessarily care for, and there's certainly no overlap in the story, in Joseph Heller's story and ours in the slightest. And we're certainly not trying to piggyback off his thing. But I did a Reddit, an IMA on Reddit as part of the release last month on the 17th, and holy shit. a ridiculously massive Joseph Heller enthusiast constituency just went ballistic about our utilization and repurposing of this title, and basically we were trying to rip off Joseph Heller's thing, which to me, in my opinion, I think if I would think he would be honored that he wrote something that is has permeated the popular culture to such a degree that someone could just think a thing that came out of his book was fucking just a saying. I would think he would take that as a compliment. But it wasn't. I guess that's a long-winded way of saying that it wasn't always the title.
Well, that book, Catch-22, it's actually ranked as the -- 1 book that people buy and start to read and never finish.
Interesting. That's funny. I fit into that category. I did not know that. Where would you? Do you recall where you picked up that Cracker Jack fact? Because that's an interesting one.
There was a list somewhere, and I think I want to say like Lit Reactor, and it was like they had like the top 5 books that people start and never finish. And I remember, that was number 1.
I wish I'd have known that when I was trying to defend my manhood on Reddit last month.
You should have called me up, Josh. I could have given you that Cracker Jack fact.
That's in the future. If I ever have a problem, I will fucking call you first, man. Yeah, when they found out, they were irate to begin with. Like, when they found out that I hadn't even read the entire book, oh my god, it fucking went ballistic. It's like, you can look it up. It's like, I think someone told me that it made like one of the biggest like IMA nightmares on Reddit ever. It was on the front page all day. It was insane. Which, to be honest with you, to me, I was like, that's awesome that it got that much publicity. That's the point. Like, I can't even imagine how many people ordered it that day.
I'll show Josh. I'm going to order this book now.
No, I'm saying ordered the movie.
Oh, ordered the movie. Oh.
Yeah, it was the day of the release. So I was like, fucking, I would like to know what our sales were from that day, because that would be hilarious if it did, like, incredible. because how much people were so mad they had to see it.
So you were able to make the movie, and you were able to now, do you have distribution for Catch-22?
Yes.
Okay.
We are working with a Toronto-based company called 108 Media, and they actually just started a sub-label for the thriller horror genre, which I don't particularly think it's necessarily very horror-oriented, but it is certainly dark and a thriller. And, anytime you have a dead body, a hot girl that's a dead body, you can certainly market it a little bit as in the horror genre. They've been great. Yeah, so it was released on the 17th of January, and it's available on literally anywhere the internet can take you for content, pretty much. iTunes, Amazon, Google, Xbox Video, Vimeo on Demand. I'm probably forgetting some, but anywhere you watch your stuff, it's probably there.
And I will make sure to link to that in the show notes as well, Josh. And
awesome, please do. Yeah, you got me. Actually, yeah. The URL is catch22movie.com, and there's links to all those outlets there, as well as a ton of extra content that can kind of give you an idea of whether or not you want to drop the few bucks to buy to watch it, because there's like featurettes, there's the blooper reel, the trailer, obviously, all the people involved, the incredible cast: Jace Bartok, Al Thompson, Brock Harris, Charmaine Starr, Donal O'Heli, and Michael Rabe were the 6 leads. And they did an incredible job. That's one of the, the review feedback and stuff. Some's positive, some's negative. Not everything's great, but one of the things that is a constant, even in poor reviews, has been the chemistry. In fact, I think one of our most scathing reviews actually made mention of how much of a credit to these actors it must be, because they had to have known each other in advance of this shoot. Because of how well they exist. 2/3 of this movie is just the 5 guys in a bed in a living room in New York talking. So if they weren't entertaining as a group together and the dynamic wasn't good, it would be a very boring film. So that's one of the more things I'm most proud of, I guess, with what we created, is that the 5 guys did not know each other at all in advance. So, that we created an environment where they could do such an amazing job is really something I'm pretty proud of with the film.
Yeah, and it's always amazing too. I think a lot of times with indie film, sometimes they have to work at such a breakneck pace that sometimes they don't get the shots that they need.
Oh, yeah.
It's always good though when you can actually focus on the acting, because obviously, that's what the main crux of all this is, right? It's going to be those actors within frame, and the writing has to be there, the editing has to be there, but sometimes so I'm guilty of this too, Josh. Sometimes as directors, we you just sort of you remember all the other stuff about the camera and everything else, and then the directing actors sort of falls by the wayside until the day you get there, and all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I got to tell these people how to perform.
That's I'm so much of kind of my path is like been such happenstance, but like I'm very grateful that I still am. I was in Turkey over the summer on just something I was acting in, which I don't do it as much as I used to, but I still do here and there. And when the agent calls, I'll go. But having that background, of course, inherently, just unavoidable, informs the way I direct. So that part, it's honestly it's almost to a detriment. Like it's the only thing I really focus on. Like I actually this thing we're starting on the 4th, this feature we're getting into. I just met with the. We just hired the production designer yesterday, so I met with her and the cinematographer in the studio space we're going to shoot this whole thing in, and some of the stuff she's asked me, I'm just like, honestly, I don't care. That's not something the director's supposed to say, I guess. But I'm like, just do what you think is best there, because honestly, and I warn any art department, anything visual, my cinematographer, my production designer, most specifically, I always warn them. I'm like, listen, the thing I am going to be chiefly concerned about is story, actor's character. Like, you're going to have to snap your fingers and say, hey, asshole, this is important. Make a decision. Pay attention on things. Like, I'm not Wes Anderson. I'm not painting a picture with every frame. I don't care what's on the bookcase in the back unless it has some sort of very important narrative thing. Like, so I go out of my way to find people who are, have a very strong opinion and have a very clear plan of what they want to do with those departments, because I know those are things that it's not that they're not important. It's just, it's not the most important thing to me. You know what I mean? It's so much more important to me what the actors are doing, what's happening, what story's being told, and whether or not it's being told in the right way to get us from point A to point B in the 90 minutes, some of the visual stuff is and can be my weakness,
So you mentioned you're working on a new project now. I know it's obviously you can't talk too much about it, unless of course I'm not doing a picture for Sony that's a secret. It's just another little indie project. I can talk about it. Okay. Well, no. Some people like Dave, I don't even want to talk about it yet until it's done. You know what I mean? And then other times, so that's why I was gonna sort of suffix that was, unless you can talk about it. Then
no, I absolutely am.
So what are you working on right now, Josh?
It's an adaptation. I mentioned Seanie, my producing partner on Catch, is a playwright, and a show he produced last June here in New York, the 13th Street Rep. It's called Love Is Dead, and it's. All this stuff kind of is really, really, really dark comedy, and this is a story. It amounts to I was reading it. It's a play anyway, so there's kind of some overlap, anyways. But in reading it, when he first sent it to me, even before the show went up, I was reading it, and I. Not even through the first act, I was like, oh, this is incredible. This is like so much my brand of comedy. I love this. And the story's great. The characters are incredible. I was like, we should, I'm already immediately thinking about, like, I want to do a film of this. And it's basically 3 22-minute, 22, 25, whatever the runtime would be, minute scenes that happen in one room between 2, 3, sometimes 4 characters within these, the 3 acts. And it kind of, reading it, I was like, this kind of reads like a sitcom, just way darker and more fucked up than anything that would ever be on a network television or on network television. I was like, so we should do it like a sitcom, and shoot it just like a sitcom, like basically trying to cram something into a box that doesn't fit into the box that you're trying to cram it into, but stuffing it in there anyways. That's kind of what we're doing. So we're shooting it like a TV show, which is the first time I've ever done this. So we're building it. We've kind of rented this stage theater that we're makeshifting into a television soundstage, and we're shooting each act as a standalone episode in a hypothetical television show. And we're going all the way with it. We're shooting it 4:3 aspect ratio, giving it like a video grain, and it's going to have the look and feel of an 80s television sitcom in every way, shape, and form. Only it's, as I said, incredibly dark. So that's the next thing, and it's totally different than anything I've ever done, and that's of course what makes it exciting, that we don't know the answers to everything, and I have to figure a bunch of shit out.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. I like anything 80s period.
Everybody does right now. That's another beautiful thing about it.
Well, I mean, you and I were both grew up around the same time, and I mean, it's just I love the 80s period. I love everything about the 80s, and so I'm just a sucker for a lot of 80s stuff. But and it does sound like something that is so. What is your plan for this? I mean, is there any? Have you? So you've had your experience with Catch-22. Do you have a different sort of distribution plan for this, or do you just want to do, do you want to do something similar with what you do with Catch-22?
I mean, yeah, the path for every, and we're doing this on a sub $50K budget. So it's a small film. I was in the case of Catch, the actors we've already cast, and there's still a few that I'm working on finalizing. With this, the actors are miles above the pay grade of what we're doing because they like the material and I guess trust that I'm capable of doing this thing. The roadmap for a little film like this is always the same thing. You're gonna we get it done, have it ready to roll to when the submission period opens for those Q1 festivals that can make or break a film, and hope you get into one of those. If you don't, you just start moving down the line throughout the year, play the festival circuit over the course of 2018, and I've done it with smaller and lesser projects already, so I have total confidence that I'll be able to do with this, find a distributor home for it, and then work with them to get it out on a commercial level sometime late 2018, early 2019 probably. And that's kind of, the flow chart for every film, at least as I know it. Obviously, if you had better connections than I or more money than I, and you could attach bankable, in quotations, talent that 100% could get you some solidified A-list distribution locked in, even before you started talking about the festivals, perhaps that would change, but I don't have those resources, so I kind of got to just see what I get, make it on spec, basically, and find out what I have, and do my best to convince people that it's good, and get it out into the world however I can.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Josh. I don't have money or connection, so it's just, I say that, and I just had the episode 149 was Dan Mirvish, who co-founded Slam Dance, and he has a.
Awesome. I had a film there a few years ago. Yeah, it's a fucking cool ass festival, man.
Yes.
They're really cool. Just the whole existence, their whole. I'm sure he gave you the story of why Slam Dance happened, and that alone is just such a cool thing.
Yeah. He also has as we sort of go all the way back to talk about film school, his instructor in film school kind of snapped and ended up being a wanted axe murderer, and really weird, macabre story. And it's an interesting story by Dan. And
how has he not made a film about that yet?
The guy who went who kind of snapped was named Aziz, and he kind of went and he wrote a screenplay. Well, he ended up selling it off, and then Johnny Depp ended up taking the script. He rewrote it, and that was his directorial debut. Well, people who have always said the story behind that, all of this about him going nuts and this, that, it's far more interesting than the movie was. And it's just
real life usually is more interesting than narrative.
Yeah, unless you're like the Coen brothers, then it's always better, you know.
Yeah.
But it's amazing, you know, what set them off and everything like that. And but yeah, it's so for everyone listening, I'll link to the show notes. It's 149, which is last week. But yeah, we don't. It's just. You know, as we were just talking about all this, I just brought that up about, you know, film festivals and connections. But even Dan has to submit to his own film festival, and Bill Ostrov, you know, he has his film festival, and you know you know, he's a good guy to know. So there's a lot of good people on here, Josh, that have. So you know, if you're you know, listen to any of the old episodes,
absolutely, man.
Yeah.
I'll punch into my my new Apple TV right now.
Oh, cool. No, but I mean, you know, that's the whole thing, though. At the end of the day, Josh, I found also is just connections. Because even if those connections can't, you know, maybe introduce you to somebody or open up a door, there's different, you know, sort of ways to handle, you know, there's different connections, because some connections can get you people, some connections can get you props, some connections can get you locations, and you know, as you know, talking about just making your movies, you know, that's what I do. If I'm going to make a movie, I always, you know, if I have a screenplay all written out, I think, you know, what could I do? Who do I know that could get me this stuff?
Absolutely, man. No, I mean, it's, you know, that's probably, as a, you know, I wear a number of different hats, and the producer hat, that's probably one of my bigger deficiencies, is my complete lack of willingness to schmooze and what have you. The whole social side of entertainment, I just don't want to go. I don't want to go to the bar. I just don't want to do any of it. It's such a chore for me to go out and just, you know, I just don't want to I don't want to have to force my shit down people's throat in social settings, and like, you know, the whole sales pitch of yourself thing to me is just like makes my skin crawl. So it's one of my bigger deficiencies, is my inability to do that. But I am 100% self-aware of how big of a deficiency as that is, because everything in this business that I do have access to, that I have generated, that has been good for me, 99% of it stems in some way, shape, or form from a social interaction / connection / what have you, and not just, you know, there's certainly some stuff that, like, I got hired for a job, I did a good job, and then that led to another piece of work or another connection or some other, you know, an investor or whatever it may be. But most of it has come from meeting some fucking person in a bar that I was like, didn't even know would be of any help to me down the road. And if I had the ability to do that more often and convince myself to get out there and do it more frequently, my life would probably be a lot easier.
Hey, I hear you about going to bars for networking events, man. I quit that long ago. For one, I know this sounds a little arrogant, but when I became the guy that everyone wanted to talk to and sort of like, hey, Dave, could you, you know, introduce me to this person? I was like, well, clearly I've now become the big fish in the small pond, you know, so to speak. And also because I was like, you don't really meet the people that.
Well, it's, you know, it's like anything else, dude. It's a numbers game. Like, yes, most of the things aren't gonna be the thing you need, but you're not gonna get that thing you need if you're not there for the other 99 things you don't need. you know what I mean? And like.
Well, I was just gonna say, was it's just, you know, who are the people that could sort of give you that green light is what I was saying, and I think you have to sort of go to where they are, because they're not going to go to things that I've learned over the years. They're not going to go to a networking event most of the time. And I had a screenwriter on here just a few episodes ago as well, when his screenplay. They didn't tell anybody who won this, by the way. This was contest, and but they did bring in the finalists. So they didn't tell anybody who won, whatever. Well, they pulled him aside, and he was in a very, very small room, and he goes, "Well, I guess this is where the losers are." And in walks Shane Black, in walks somebody else, and all these guys are A-lists. I think. A couple, I forget who the other people were, but and he saw them and they were like, "Oh my god!" And they were like, "Well, congratulations, you actually won this competition. You now get to pitch your screenplay to us." And he was just absolutely like blown away. And the other room, however, which was the huge room, was for all like the people who were finalists, and they got to pitch to like assistants and stuff like that. So it was just sort of mind blowing how the big room and the small room sort of played out. I mean, if we were to go there, you think the big room is where you're honored in front of everybody, but in fact it wasn't. It was actually the small room.
Yep. Yeah, there's just no way of fucking knowing, dude. That's why it's a skill, because it's about the perseverance of just fucking putting yourself out there constantly.
Yeah. So
yep.
I mean, so Josh, we've been talking for about an hour now.
We have,
we have, my friend. I cheat. I have your IMDb and a counter on in front of me, so I kind of cheat. So,
yeah, I have a counter too. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm not like in some terrible hurry though. It's not like I'm trying to get off the line. If you have more questions or more things you want to talk about, man, I'm all yours.
Well, the thing is, I do have to run very soon.
Okay.
But I do have maybe two more questions, and the first one is, we've been talking for about an hour, and is there anything that we didn't get a chance to discuss and maybe we wanted to talk about, or maybe something you wanted to say, anything you wanted to say to put a period at the end of this whole conversation?
Well, yeah, the one project I would certainly want to shamelessly plug a little is that Amazon series, Batteries Not Included, that I do, which is a interview-based documentary series where I kind of nerd out and talk to toy game content creators from the 80s, early 90s about, why they do what they do, basically, and kind of what nostalgia means to them, and what role it plays in their career. That's it's an Amazon Prime series that people can watch without forking over any money, whether they have Amazon Prime or not. You can watch it with ads if you're not a Prime subscriber. But I don't know. Is there anyone left who's not a Prime subscriber? I think Bezos has everyone hooked already.
Yeah, I even subscribe to Amazon Prime. Reason being is because it's just easier now just to be able to order stuff through my phone and not have to fight people at the store.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, dude, shopping. It's between in New York. I don't know if it's there in Philly yet, but we have Google Express, which is an on-demand, either same day or next day grocery. They work with like Target, Walgreens, Fairway, Shopping, whatever the hell it is, some grocery store. And you basically order anything that's not perishable. Basically, you can get delivered to your door next day, cheap as shit. And Google oversees that, and then Amazon actually has one as well. So yeah, I mean, shopping at stores, like, no way. It's completely an antiquated activity. I don't understand why anyone does it.
I do enjoy shopping in New York, though. I have to admit, like, I went into a Duane Reade's, and you can buy alcohol freely. Because remember, Pennsylvania is still like a Quaker state. We're still, so we still have all these weird, but it's changing. But still, when I was in there, like again last April, I could just walk in there, buy myself a 6-pack of Corona. And it wasn't a whole big, it was like no big deal. And I said, see, this is what it should be. You
can buy bottles of liquor till fucking anytime you want.
Yeah. And that's the way it should be. Just be able to, just be able to go in and just be able to buy booze. But
there are no rules.
It's funny. When I was going up to New York, I had a friend of mine. I posted about, I'm taking a trip to New York, and I said I'm learning all about New York from these movies, and it was like Escape from New York with Kurt Russell, Jason Takes Manhattan, this and that, and my friend who lives up there was like, oh, come the hell on. He's like, Philadelphia's 10 times worse than New York. He goes, streets that lead nowhere. He goes, this, that, and the other thing, and I was like, dude, I'm not even going to try to argue anymore. But
there are pros and cons to every metropolis.
Yeah, and as I've said before too, Josh, there's pros and cons to living in, maybe even a small town, because if you live in a small town, things you have a somewhat easier time maybe. Because if people who have locations, they might be able to. Hey, I know Josh. Josh grew up in that school. He went to school with my grandson or whatever.
Now, the first feature I directed, I went back and shot it in Cleveland, in and around Cleveland, because I knew I could get literally. I mean, all it cost us was food, and that was it.
Yeah. You can't beat that, man. You honest to God cannot beat that. And that's the key of all this, is I think building that network. See, again, just going back to networking and sort of working those angles. But I'm also going to link, by the way, Josh, 2 batteries not included in the show notes. So again, everyone can check that out on Prime. I'm sorry, at Amazon. And either they have Prime or not. And
yes.
And because again, I'm going to definitely check that out because again,
awesome. If you dig the '80s, dude, it's cool. It's they're all so passionate about, and most of them are, they're all obviously they're wildly accomplished individuals, so they've been doing it forever. And like you would think in most cases that there would be a diminished enthusiasm, and there is not. They all love what they do, and they're all really cool people. Which most successful people are cool people because they had to network and be liked by people to get where they are as well. Just like we were discussing with filmmaking, it's. Most people who are doing well because they are good to be around. They are entertaining and fun to be around, and that's why they have been hired so many times and been asked to be around them.
Yeah, very, very true, Josh. And I think there's a lot of validity to what Conan O'Brien once said. Just be a good person and work hard, and good things will happen. I think that's what he said. I usually kill quotes here on this show.
It sounds like something that could easily fit into something he's definitely said, even if it's not. So,
Josh, it has been awesome talking to you. And then one final question is, where can people find you at online?
My production company, which also has links to all the things we've talked about, or can get you 2 links for all the things we talked about, is NYEH Entertainment, NYEH Entertainment.com. And, I'm on Twitter and Instagram, just at Josh Folan for Twitter. My shift key is broke Instagram, and that's good enough. There's a million others, but those are the important ones, I guess.
Yeah, but we have to stalk each other on Twitter now, by the way.
Absolutely. I 100% will as soon as I get off here.
And Twitter's my thing. Twitter and YouTube now I'm slowly getting into.
I'm on YouTube, of course too. Twitter doesn't. I don't know, man. It doesn't. I mean, I use it because it actually, Amazon Prime, great example. Some of the things that I have on there, like if I post some shit on Twitter, and it's not like I have some massive following or anything, but just properly hashtagged, I will see the days that I post for certain project, I see spikes in Amazon Prime minutes watched, and like that's mind blowing to me. And that's a Twitter thing, I think. Facebook and communicating with the people who I'm like close to is much more my speed than kind of just blasting things out to the ether. But they all have their purpose.
Yeah, definitely. They're all tools of the trade.
Yep.
Everyone, DaveBullis.com, Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. Josh, I want to say thanks a lot for coming on, buddy.
Oh, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.